Hello and welcome to the Grand Cinema Hotel, a podcast hosted by two friends who love cinema. Tonight you'll be staying in room 172, Sanctuary, the psychosexual thriller directed by Zachary Wicken. So go ahead and get comfortable and throw on that do not disturb sign as we scream our safe word with Sanctuary.
It's going to be so weird to not have this as part of my routine anymore.
What do you mean?
What's going on, all my doms and subs, and thank you for checking back in. As always, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment if you're watching on YouTube. And as always, I'm your host, Gus, and I'm joined, as always, by Alvaro.
What's up, guys?
And today, we're here with an extra episode. I'm not really sure. What do you think about that? Is this an extra episode, or are we making up for the 2 weeks we didn't put episodes out?
I think it should. We're making up.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't promise the third one on the, the normal Mondays that we do drop, but I was really excited to do this. This is a movie that I haven't really had too much insight to. I hadn't seen the trailer before this. I hadn't really looked into it at all. I just knew Christopher Abbott, Margaret Qualley. I was like, okay, these are two interesting actors. I know, we're a huge fan of Christopher Abbott on this podcast, but you, on the other hand, Alvaro, I know you had some hype for this movie, right?
Yeah, for some reason, I don't even know how I really came across it before. I think it's TIFF last year.
It was the picture of Margaret Qualley in the wig, huh?
No, but it was because that was already before. I had already known because I read the plot of the movie before it came out in TIFF, and I saw that it was Christopher Abbott and Margaret Qualley, and the premise of reading the description back then is like it's something just mentioning the dominatrix relationship. I just became instantly interested in wanting to see it. I didn't even know if it would be good, honestly, and to my surprise, I really like it. So
yeah, I mean, but just go ahead and get that out of the way early. We both think this is a very good movie, right?
Yeah.
I felt re-energized walking out of the theater after having been so IP mainstream heavy in the last couple of months. As much as I loved those movies, this really was just a film. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's it too.
It kind of scratched an itch I didn't even know I really had. Very throwback type of movie, right?
Yeah.
As a young kid in the 90s and early 2000s, I feel like this is the kind of movie my parents would have watched and have said, like, oh, go play with your toys or whatever. It's like a very adult movie, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't feel baby-brained saying that, like, oh, this is just past my sensibilities, right? Like, this is for sure an adult movie with a lot of adult subject matter.
I think so.
And it was really refreshing, because like as violent as John Wick is, I wouldn't necessarily say it's an adult movie.
Yeah, I think it still has like the eye candy for a teenager,
Yeah, like this is the kind of movie I feel like in the 90s you probably would have went and seen at midnight,
Mm-hmm. I like that you said it was a itch that you didn't know you had. I do think that kind of is somewhat similar to it. I would think. I mean, there's this kind of recurring joke that there's not enough sex in movies anymore, and I know sometimes we talk about the Puritans, right?
Yes.
They don't really enjoy that type of stuff just being thrown in there, and then I think it does have to do probably maybe with you have stuff like Euphoria, which really like is glamorizing that type of lifestyle. So I think maybe kind of people are maybe over it or kind of don't feel anymore like sex is really needed and stuff. But when it's done with taste, as we've always talked about in this podcast, and when it's done to really show a relationship that I'm sure there's other films who have talked about this or have had similar premises, but it genuinely felt very unique to me.
Yeah, for sure. This is definitely a unique movie,
like up to date too, is
for
what
the
I'm saying.
time that we're in.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I can't think of many other movies that are like this. At least American movies. I feel like it's always good to preface that when you're talking about a movie like this, because I'm sure I honestly bet there's probably like 10 Korean movies like this, or Japanese movies like this, or maybe even, as TikTok would like to say, some Eastern European movie.
Yeah,
right?
from the yeah.
But I don't have access to those on a daily basis. So for me, this is kind of a unique film, you know, and I really appreciated that aspect of it, that I knew this wasn't going to be something that I could talk to people about on the street, you know, when I'm out in public, like, oh, have you seen this movie lately? So that also felt like it made the movie kind of personal to me. And I mean, obviously you as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that little thing that we have, which is funny because it kind of plays on the movie itself, right?
Exactly.
Like, this is unintended, but because the movie's so small and because so few people have seen it, I feel like this is kind of a, oh, me and you have this secret that no one else knows about, right?
They don't know, yeah.
And it's like, they don't know that this is actually really good. And it makes me feel really happy, right? And
Yeah.
in the movie, they're talking about something else, and me and you were just talking about a movie.
Yeah, no, it does play really well into that. And I like that you brought that up, because I do feel we've obviously talked about on this podcast, my choice for my birthday was another Christopher Abbott movie that's probably even smaller than this, you know, but it is crazy that I think the audience for this is pretty minimal, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Neon really has the juice yet, even though they have put out a lot of really good movies. I mean, they're putting out some of the better movies right now, but they don't have that A24 allure of like, oh, I'm going to go see the new Neon movie.
And
Not yet, at least.
It's interesting though, because you know how we've talked about, obviously they both have become now more mid-budget, obviously, but where the part still seems to me where Neon is still more independent, more smaller than them, is they always talk about for like A24 they'll release like, you know, 15 movies in the year, but they don't promo all of them because they don't all do very well.
There's a lot of A24 movies at the end of the year. Like, what's that?
I saw Sharper Things, right? And like that movie's A24 doesn't show that movie at all, you know? And it's a movie that even they probably
online
felt
ceramics Sharper Things shirt.
And it's like they felt even themselves like this is a movie that's not as good as the other stuff. Neon doesn't.
They know what's hype.
Yeah, and Neon doesn't feel like they get to do that. Like every movie they make, they do market like, go watch this, and then if it clicks, it clicks, and if it doesn't, then they take the L on that. Because I mean, they have this, like, you know, these 2 weeks, and then it always feels like they move on, like, or within like at least a month. Because before it's like how to blow up a pipeline, you know. But
was that a Neon movie?
Yeah.
So they distributed that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, they are kind of going a little more cutting edge. I feel like if you've ever heard the CEO of Neon talk, he's kind of thrown shots at A24 of like, oh, we're not like a marketing merch company. You know, we make films.
Yeah.
And they do have the Oscars to back that up. Or not the Oscars, sorry. They do with Parasite. But what
nominations, I would say too.
Con, whatever.
Yeah.
They've won the last 4 of those in a row.
They destroy there, yeah.
You know, in the snooty artist cinema French world that maybe not everybody is into, they're dominating, right? So I think they are like, you know, the real people who quote unquote matter know what's good, and I think they're kind of okay with, you know, where they are as a distributor.
And I do feel comfortable in us being, because I feel like we are some of the people we're describing, because like you said, the podcast was founded on Titan, right? We talked about Triangle of Sadness, and we'll probably talk about the other movie that won this year.
Wasn't Crimes of the Future Neon?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're only listening on YouTube, you don't even know about that secret episode. That's insane. I that's never even been brought up, I think. Right?
No, yeah, but
yeah, the Crimes of the Future episode is a podcast only episode due to YouTube bullshit.
Yeah,
but yeah,
they don't like us.
YouTube, I don't know. It's not YouTube that doesn't like us. It's just,
that specific, that whoever is in charge of that movie.
Yeah, not even. I don't even think it was that. Anyways, too behind the scenes on it, but. Yeah, so Neon is definitely making these interesting movies and these interesting choices, and I do think that they have kind of accepted more of like a prestige movie thing, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, it is what it is. When you're making real art, you kind of have to accept that it's not going to be the most mainstream thing, and I don't know how A24 did it. I guess it's with cool t-shirts and coffee mugs, right?
Yeah.
On top of making cool movies, but Neon hasn't really figured out that angle yet.
It's not I
don't see it happening soon either.
It's not hip. It's not cool.
It's the coolest.
Yeah, to me, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, no, but like I said, this podcast obviously feels they're equal in our eyes. At the end of the year, both prior years, we've always talked about who had the better year, Neon or A24, and I know that they've played a big part in us realizing how much we like movies, and I think that's the closest right now for me. Even though you have Annapurna's and even more independent type of films, I feel like they're making the smaller artsy films that are gonna last in 20 years.
We'll see.
Yeah,
That's
no,
a hard
we'll see.
argument to say
Yeah,
nowadays, right?
Yeah, but I do
get
think
what you mean.
yeah, we look back at the 70s experimental films. I think there's a couple of, if there's any that are gonna do that, it's gonna be from them.
I hope so. Man, I get so nervous when I think about the future movies. I'm like, no one cares. 20 years and 5 years. This movie will be on HBO Max or Neon streaming service, and then they'll just pull it and be like, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, what are you
tax purposes.
What are you talking about? Yeah,
It's like that Seinfeld clip of Kramer. It's like, they write it off. What
Yeah.
is writing it off? Those who know how to write off, write it off. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Just
I hope not. It gets very bleak sometimes when you think about that. Like when you say 20 years from now, I'm like, probably not.
yeah,
Like,
but
Iron Man was the best movie of all time.
yeah, that is what stands out. I mean, it's funny that you bring that up because I think obviously the episode we did before is like the polar opposite in terms of scale, but that is where the appreciative, I guess, as a podcast comes, because all of those people going to go watch, in the movie theater, Spider-Verse it's kind of what paid for the one showing of Sanctuary.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, I will say, since I had mentioned it earlier about the IP train kind of coming to a halt for a little while. Well, I don't know. We're seeing The Flash next week.
Yeah.
Right? I will say, though, because Spider-Verse was cinema, and I believe Sanctuary is also cinema, I was really euphoric walking out of the movies, because I felt like I had seen two of the year's best back to back, and they were so polar opposite. And, I'm the Chad movie watcher. I simply enjoy both. Right? But I just feel like this is a really nice balance. I saw like the ultimate, animation is cinema. Kids movies can be great movie, but then I also got to see just the most like, don't bring your fucking kid here type of movie, And I was just like, this is nice, man. I really like this. I went from HBO to HBO After Dark real fast. But man, when I walked out, I just felt rejuvenated. I felt like I don't know, man. I felt like the end of The Breakfast Club. I threw my fist in the air.
Yeah, I will say, just obviously going to dive deeper into it, but that when you said that it felt like that itch that you didn't know you had to scratch, I think that's how I felt emotionally too, in terms of the emotions I felt through this movie were not ones I usually feel watching movies, like to think about the things it made me think about. And also a thing that I found really interesting about this is, while it is very character driven and the actors here really perform, and it's obviously just them for 99% of the runtime, is that oh, sorry. It actually I lost my train of thought.
No, that's fine. I did want to ask you, and not to put you too much on the spot here. Well, are you ready?
No, you could ask me.
No, go ahead. I don't want you to lose this.
Because I was just going to say the emotions that I felt were also tied in really well with comedic relief moments, where I thought that the ridiculousness in this, while funny, was also true in things that I could find, or in the whole arc of the story that's going on here, the characters that I established, I could see these people being just very lived in, which is what we talked about in Spider-Verse as well, where these characters seem like I could walk next to them in the street.
Yeah, definitely. They got the Lydia Tarr.
Yeah,
that's the easiest way to put it now. She's real. Would Lydia Tarr like this movie? But what I meant to ask you is that you had seen this movie many weeks before me, because you saw it. I don't know if it was technically early or not. I feel like I'm seeing this movie late. But you got to do something you haven't always got to do, which is have you attended a Q&A, right?
Yeah, live Q&A
finally.
After
with Margaret Qualley and Zachary Wiggin, right?
Yeah.
Were you a Cub reporter for the Grand Cinema Hotel? I'm sure you didn't ask a question. I know that you probably didn't, but anything interesting or any kind of insight that maybe you or I or someone else wouldn't find on YouTube, you know?
I kind of it wasn't the type of Q&A where they were asking people to do questions and they did it real quick, but it seemed like they were trying to get one or two in and nobody had a question. I found that interesting. I wasn't sat too close to the front, so I felt like it would be really weird to scream a question personally.
They didn't even have a microphone.
Yeah, so
Even we have a microphone.
besides that, it did seem like the thing that I took a lot from the movie that I've been saving, that he said that I guess was interesting to me, but also kind of lives to me as a stretch into what he said.
The director said this?
Yeah, is that kind of getting ahead of myself, but there's only two other people in this movie for like half a second.
They're extras.
Split, and and it's an older couple. And when you're watching this movie, it just seems like everything is so in place for a reason. And he was kind of talking about, and nobody had ever asked him this before, and he just kind of wanted to give us an interesting, like this was an interesting part while he was writing that he put thought to that I don't know if many people had caught, but he said that he purposely did try to get actors that looked a certain way casted as those extras, and then that kind of prompted the question. I'm not sure who was the person who was mediating the questions actually, but it seems like somebody that does this very often because they knew each other, so they were like laughing, you know. But he said that basically, and once you get to the end, I feel like it kind of makes sense, but that it is supposed to be like what they're supposed to be in the future. And so then once you watch the movie, and obviously when I rewatched this with you, I kind of paid more attention to the small second there that we see these other extra characters. What kind of relationship do they have? And it's very normal.
Yeah.
And what I took of that, what after it gave you a lot of thought in terms of, you know, wanting to, when you're impressed by things or when you think you want to write things like this, I just kind of felt like, again, the live thing in a couple that old that loves each other that hard could have had that exact type of encounter and meeting when they first met. And that's the type of stuff where they talk about you don't know what somebody's been through. And I kind of felt like to be able to, in a way, something that seems so small, kind of tie back in a way that made me think about it and be kind of like connect to what I took away from the movie. Kind of made me more feel like I'm excited for what he might do. I don't know if there's a lot of directors that we've talked about before that they made one good movie and, you know, the rest are just forgotten as well. But because I got that chance with them and he, like, that little comment there, I felt like it kind of just solidified why I like the movie so much.
Yeah, see, that's really good stuff because who knows if he said that in
anywhere on like recorded,
else,
right?
You know, and I always do think it's cool that you have gotten a chance to go to these things here and there. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad you did that because who knows if that is out there. Maybe the conversation is on YouTube for all you know, but I mean, if they didn't have a microphone, I really don't think anybody was recording it either.
It was pretty dark in there too, just because it wasn't the biggest theater. It's one of the smaller AMCs.
What was Margaret Qualley like?
Yeah, so she seems like she's very, very, I mean, even we were watching a YouTube video of her. She just seems like she's her as a person seems like she's the opposite of anything that she plays. I know we've like obviously Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as well. Yeah, and like she just seems like she's more into, like, she's not from LA.
She seems pretty down to earth.
So like she seems to be a lot about building relationships with people, and she trusts people. And another interesting thing actually that I did learn, I'm glad that you asked me about this because it reminded me, is that her and Christopher Abbott had been talking for years about working together. And so when Zachary Wiggin pitched this movie to Margaret Qualley, she brought up like we should ask Chris if he would want to do it. And that was the reason why, like, Zachary was like, yeah, that would be fantastic. Like, I'd love to have him in the movie, you know? And like I just think that's really cool because, like you said, we really like Margaret Qualley does a lot, obviously, and I haven't really watched a lot of her movies, but we are big fans of Christopher Abbott, so it's kind of cool to see somebody who I do think is really down to earth, like Margaret Qualley, feel the same way about somebody like Christopher Abbott, you know?
You know, I haven't really seen much of her work because the other two things I have seen her in, she was very small role. So Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but she's also in The Nice Guys. She is the what's the girl's name that they're looking for the entire time?
I don't remember at the top of my head, but I didn't even. She's pretty young in that
I
movie,
always
huh?
want to say Shasta, but that's the girl from fucking.
Shasta.
That's the girl that Joaquin Phoenix is with in Inherent Vice. I never remember what her name is.
I'm gonna look it up.
But the other thing I'm interested in watching because of this, and I should be anyway, just because it's a Claire Denis movie, is
Amelia.
Stars at Noon. Oh yeah, Amelia.
Oh, it Stars at Noon, yeah.
But Stars at Noon
Yes.
is the other one that came out this year. Or not this year, sorry, 2022. And I had seen some people who are not the biggest fans of Sanctuary, and there was another movie similar to Stars at Noon. But they're like, just watch this. Like, this is... Not that they're similar, but they're like, this is the one of like the steamy romance movie. If you want to see Margaret Qualley in one of those movies, watch that. But I do want to see it now after seeing this movie because I thought she was fantastic in this movie. I don't want to say she outacted Christopher Abbott because I do think that that's how the role is written. But, he's also doing just phenomenal work in this. And I do think that because getting into the movie just a little bit here, I do think because it's a one room location for the entire runtime, maybe except for like 20 seconds, which is the sequence you're talking about because it happens by the elevator. It's kind of got that play energy that I don't always love, but in this case I really did, and I do think it's because the cinematography
Exactly.
and the lighting and the blocking and the framing and everything like that is done extremely well and is also done creatively, but also while having intent. I know some people forget that film is a visual medium and the visuals are just as important as the story. So I do think that this did fun and creative things to kind of expand the boundaries of the set,
Yeah, I agree.
It's not a tiny hotel room by
No,
any
it's not.
means.
It's not.
It's one of the most extravagant hotel rooms you could probably stay in. but also, these things can still feel really claustrophobic.
Yeah, no, I agree. I actually really like that you brought up the obviously we'll get into cinematography more, but the blocking was something that I think is what made this movie to me and you.
Is this a COVID movie? Did they say anything about that? Was this
I
filmed during quarantine or shot around that time where the actors are still wearing masks between takes and stuff like that? Because a lot of other movies with similar premises of one hotel room or whatever kind of came out
of
in the
that
past year or two.
See, they didn't mention it, and I kind of felt the same way. Like that was a question that lingered over me because they said of how fast they did this movie,
18
which is
days.
Yeah, so it made me feel like that seems like it would be in a rush, right? Like for a pandemic. But they didn't mention it, so I don't think so. Let
me see. I mean, well, go ahead. I'm
Yeah.
gonna see if I can get it on, the
maybe
most
it could
reliable source on the internet, Wikipedia.
But the blocking is something that really stood out to this movie a lot, and I think it's a movie that has one of the biggest premises to be able to highlight what blocking does in cinema. And I mean, this movie is all about power dynamics and the balance of power and being a sub and a dom. And I think that's when a lot of like the physical relationship and spacing between our characters can say a lot. And we've kind of talked about Martin Scorsese always really praising Ari Aster for really understanding the language of cinema. And I think that this movie is why I felt like it excelled to me, as apart from the characters and the acting being so centered and them really obviously doing an outstanding job. But it's that the blocking, so much is said by the positions that our characters are sat in and what the power dynamics physically are. And the other part, the cinematography that you said, it always seems like every frame was thought of to not copy anything else that what they did, and that's what keeps it really fresh, honestly, and new. Yeah, I think that's basically my end of the thought. But Yeah, my bad.
Oh no, you're all good. So the cinematography, by the way, is done by his name is Ludovica Isidori, and the editing is Lance Edmonds.
Editing is really well.
Yeah, I was gonna say that these things are extremely important aspects of this film. So shout out them as always. What?
Because you brought up the editor, there was another thing that he brought up about that. He wanted to do, there's a shot in the movie where they're trying to get the phone and they drop to the floor and then they try to reach it. Zachary Wiggins' head, he tried to make that a one shot. So he was trying to get the shot start where the phone gets like that and then have the camera twist in as they fell. No, they were like, you can't. They tried, and it wasn't working. And then I just really think like the effect of something when you're stunted by what is possible as a director, it's up to the editor to basically give us that same feeling, right? And I think that's where you talk about them being so important. And I think that scene, whatever it was that he was trying to evoke, I think I felt exactly.
I love that because while this might not be everyone's favorite movie, you could think it's a piece of shit. You could think it's really great. I do think it's exciting to hear that Zachary Wiggin is trying things that are not possible. Like those are things that you want to hear from newer filmmakers, like I always think, and not to compare him at all, but there's that famous Orson Welles quote about like, how did you come up with these ideas for Citizen Kane? And it's like, by simply not knowing that they weren't possible, like just out of ignorance, like, oh, I can get the camera to twist and go down and whatever. And like, no, you can't, because the camera is 200 pounds and it doesn't work like that. And who's going to twist,
Yeah.
And then like, that's, that movie magic of editing, which is important. Somebody tell Netflix that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the last person I think we really need to bring up is the writer. So that would be Micah Bloomberg. And before we had started this episode, I was just seeing what was out there on the tubes. There's a little Vanity Fair piece, I believe, with Zachary Wiggin and
cool.
the actors. The concept for the story is like half Micah Bloomberg and half Zachary Wiggin. That's his name, right? Wiggin?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. When the story was brought to Micah Bloomberg, he was like, oh, this is interesting because I already have a stage play, one act of dominatrix and her client. And so then they blended it with like Zachary Wiggins' characters, and then they got this perfect blend. Well, I think a perfect blend, of this stage play aspect and then this movie making aspect to just really just give me this really euphoric, exciting feeling when I walked out of the movies, of like, yes, these people understand, I felt like these are people who love the craft, and I always want that when I walk out of the movies. And, not to bring up Spider-Verse again, but I feel that in Spider-Verse, and that's just a really good feeling to have. And then when it's about a movie that has, I don't want to say raunchy subject matter, but, not exactly,
family friendly,
not exactly dinner conversation.
Yeah.
It's not something you would talk about at the dinner table. And then you make it so exciting and so fresh. And also to like, we used to say this a long time ago. I feel like I want to take a shower after watching this movie, surprisingly, not to give anything away, because I don't know if this is the type of film where you want to go in knowing that the ending just gives you this thing that you're like, wow, I guess I should have seen that coming, but also like, whoa, you know what I mean? Yeah,
It's a love story.
maybe. You don't want to give anything away. There you go, giving it away. But yeah, and then another thing I thought was interesting, and this is why I brought up the Q&A as well, is that the way Vanity Fair or whoever it was led off the YouTube video was the actors putting an emphasis on like, yeah, like sometimes movies aren't as deep as you guys say they are, and they're just a really fun time. And like that was the whole point, is that we wanted to make something crazy and fun that you go see to have a really good time and talk about. And it isn't this deep thematic, let's unpack all of this. So, as a podcaster, I'm like, oh shit, here goes all my thoughts. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
They're telling me like, you're overthinking it, bro. Right? Did they say anything like that when you were at the Q&A?
Not to that extent, I would say. I think it did come across though as Zachary Wiggin. Like I said, there it was more pushed towards the relationship they had with each other and how comfortable they were with each other, and the fact that they did it in 18 days did kind of end up feeling like it was easy for them to kind of pull this off. It doesn't mean that there was no effort there, but I think that it did seem like Zachary Wiggin and maybe some of the writing was so vital to the story here that was the main component, and it being in a hotel room kind of maybe limits you to what you can do, but I think that they made every small choice that they could make well, even when it comes to picking the colors, even her outfits and stuff like that. So I think it didn't come off like this was something that should be deep. Like, you know what I mean? But I do feel like the substance itself lends itself, because it's not a family friendly topic, lends itself to discussions that may be deeper.
You know, it kind of is like a reflection of the person who watches it, right? I guess if you really think that this is like this extremely deep, twisted, psychosexual movie, right? That you look down at these people when you're watching this, then yeah, maybe it is kind of gonna hit you in a different way, versus if you're more open-minded to, like, kind of what you said, if it is true that couple is supposed to be like I'm so Marvel brained right now, or so spider brained right now. If there's a multiverse version of them, right? No, but if this older couple is meant to be a reflection of, oh, you never know how you could how love stories start, right? And you kind of are more open-minded about these things, I could see why you would seem like, yeah, it was just, I don't know, just freaks being freaks, dude.
Like I've met people
I
like
don't judge
this.
people like this, I guess,
He's like, I did the whole time I was thinking about, because me and you joke about this a lot, just because, I mean, we love Ari Aster, but what this guy thinks is scary is like, what a nerd, right?
Yeah.
I did feel that way after listening to Zachary Wiggin, that like, he's not that he's been in these positions to be, any of the characters in this movie, but that this is what he probably has friends and he imagines is what goes on. And like, again, kind of doing that Orson Welles thing out of not knowing. That's what, like, I, out of not knowing, assumed that this is real or it could happen.
Well, for me at least, I was telling you that I do think that this movie, someone could watch it and be like, that's so unrealistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more realistic than most movies that come out. I'm like, dude, this is happening to some rich guy right now, bro.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean,
and he's gonna, no spoilers. I won't talk about the future, but
but it's the fact that, like, maybe the specifics aren't exact, but this relationship, and when you get into the deeper reasonings as to why she's a dominatrix, why this relationship would be this weird. Like, it completely makes sense,
I think one thing we could talk about as like a theme in the movie without getting too heady about it, which is like, it's not like that's what we're best at doing anyways, is this idea that a dominatrix and a CEO are not that different from each other.
Mm-hmm.
That was also reflected on in like the menu, right?
Yeah.
But how the type of person to be a dominatrix, how confident you would have to be, or at least act like you are, is the kind of that's the kind of inspiration a CEO seeks, is to dominate people in the same exact way, right?
Yeah.
And not everyone who's a CEO has the confidence of a dominatrix, and it's just like that. To me, was the most interesting dynamic in the movie, is that she is almost like she was his coach. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to teach you how to be a boss. I'm going to teach you how to not be this little wimpy, wormy coward, and then the fun part is the fight back of like, oh, you just think I'm this wimpy little coward, and by the end you get to see whether he is or he isn't, or if she is a boss or she's not a boss, but it's not really that important, because when you get to the end and you see that last shot, it's kind of just, I don't want to say it's throwaway, but what happens in that hotel room is its own world. And I did feel like, as a moviegoer, I felt the same way. As soon as they left that hotel room, I'm like, okay, well, that's all gone now. Stay in there.
I think
they're just people now.
The fact that you kind of said, like, the CEO and the dominatrix relationship and like how they're similar, that kind of the ending just kind of really establishes that the understanding of what our characters were trying to get over to each other, and the obviously main beef of this movie or the main part of this movie has obviously they both come to the conclusion that they're both right, you know, and like I think that's like as an audience member when you also feel like that's why the ending isn't like to me it's not ridiculous because of what you said. It'd be like this makes sense that after the stress that this character is put in, the male character Christopher Abbott here, and the relationship that he has with this dominatrix, the outcome of what happens makes complete sense to me, you know. And I think that sometimes you walk out of movies not really understanding people's choices or really feeling the same way the characters in the movie felt. And I did feel like they did a really good job of relaying to you why this is normal.
You know, what do you think about maybe from a criticism point of view that this movie is? I don't know. I don't even know if this is anything people are saying, but because of the stage aspect of it, and because it's just two characters talking the entire time, do you think that this movie gets heavy-handed with what its themes are? Like it's literally smacking you in the face with them?
I don't think so. I think, and the reason I don't think so is because I think it's a funny movie too, and that's not something that it stands out to me a lot. But I think if you really sit there and listen to the way these lines are meant to be delivered, and Christopher Abbott does such a good way of doing it, and I think the comedic part of it, and I don't feel like this is spoiling anything, but he's a certain person, and you're very solidified by what kind of person he is once you have those first initial conversations that he has with Margaret Qualley's character. So you're like, he is someone who's unsure of himself. So when he says these things thinking he sounds cool, they're funny to me because I know they're funny to her. Mm-hmm. And those deliverances, I feel like, cut what the heavy-handedness would be, because in a movie that should be very high, like that is very dialogue driven, I don't think the dialogue is very like, oh, this is hard movie to understand. I still think it really keeps that very grounded, and I think that's like kind of very easy to. That I think that may be some of the criticism, is that I don't think they think that the dialogue between them is very like realistic, or it seems kind of like not on the level that you think this movie is on the level of.
Yeah, see, so I would disagree with that, and I like that's not what you're saying, but I mean I would disagree with that take. You know, I didn't feel that way at all. Like the unrealistic aspect of it. I mean, how when like the whole point of the movie is that it starts off of what is essentially like a business breakup. You know.
Yeah.
So.
I also
it delves between this what's real, what's not real. You know, I don't want to say it's a meta movie, but you know, they break character. You know, she doesn't become Margaret Qualley. But,
yeah,
you know, she's playing a character. She's a character who is a character. You know, and I did think that it was weaving that well. You know, like I don't think it was exactly the trickiest thing to navigate, but I was like, this is really sticking the landing to me.
And that's what because I don't agree with what I'm saying, but I think that when I have read what people have an issue with is that they think it's boring. So
really?
like if they think it's boring, I think it comes down to you don't think this conversation is actually full of like the power dynamics. We're talking about this. Back to him, back to her, back to him, back to... Because, like, to me, that's what makes the movie interesting. I was like, it's changing in our eyes. She thinks she's the boss. He thinks she's the boss. She thinks he's the boss. He thinks... Like, from one word to another within... Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, to me, the blocking, literally, where our character decides to sit, the distance between them, how they're looking at each other, all of those things, to me, I'm like, I'm so interested while all of this is happening. And what you talk about, you throw the cinematography and these creative shots, all of a sudden, there's Punch Drunk Love kind of movie.
Baby. This movie's gorgeous.
Like it just throws colors at your screen just cause, and I'm there for it. But that's why I don't find it boring at all. But I have seen that is what people think, and they don't really appreciate Christopher Abbott's character as much as they do Margaret Qualley.
Oh, she's still in the show here.
Yeah,
I mean,
this
is her big breakout performance to me, at least. I know she was in that show. The show that might as well be like whitewashing the brown woman's struggle.
Yeah,
have you seen that?
That's one of my parents' favorite shows.
Maid, right?
Yeah, my parents love that show.
This is literally everybody knows a Mexican chick like this.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's the only other thing.
This white girl with blue eyes, right?
Yeah, because you know what's funny is I had prompted a question if like it was open question, right? I had prompted a question in terms of she's I had looked a little into the stuff that she had done, and I was like, there's no real consistency in terms of what you'll take up. So what is your criteria to what kind of roles you choose, because you work with Quentin Tarantino and then you do something like a TV series, and then like that's something that usually aren't really seen in the same scope. And it's not because everybody's like, well, Margaret Qualley fell off. It's just because she's choosing to do that currently. So it's interesting to me to go to that, and then Sanctuary, and then like you said, she's been in smaller roles and other things. And
acting's just different now than it was before.
Yeah.
You have to do both now.
Yeah, exactly. And I see nothing wrong with that. I think some of the older heads do, but I think personally it's...
We used to have movie stars.
Yeah, and I think...
Not working actors.
And I think personally, though, that it just kind of shows someone like me who ends up enjoying performances, I'll take them anywhere,
It's funny that you say that about Quentin Tarantino and like the scope of being in one of his movies, but they talk about how that group of young actors that was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, they're all huge famous actors now. They're like, so QT did it first,
What
they're
is
like
it?
He got to not, this is romanticizing the whole thing, but it's not like, oh, they went to the school of Tarantino on how to be, whatever. He's not Steven Spielberg yet, where they're we all listened to what Papa said.
But there was a reason these people were chosen, because I know there's
he has taste.
Texas
Austin Butler,
yeah.
Elvis Presley.
Yeah, so I'm just saying it. Obviously, the people that they choose for this movie, QT has various people, and like this, maybe you got to put her in this, But at the end of the day, I do feel like you could tell when certain actors, from a young age, are just ready to act, like you said, like they're working actors, so they'll turn it on for any role that you ask them to.
Yeah, this is a sidebar, but since we're talking about Quentin Tarantino, I wanted to bring it up. R.I.P. Rick Dalton, right?
Oh yeah,
that's one of the funnier things that's been happening in the world of movies lately. If you don't know,
that's funny.
Quentin Tarantino on his podcast, Video Archives or whatever it's called, decided that today, or not today, but whatever date it was like. Do you remember what day it was supposed to be?
I don't remember what day it was.
Anyways, it was the passing of Rick Dalton, beloved actor. Legendary screen presence, right? He passed away. Quentin Tarantino did a full-on podcast episode. I wanted to bring it up because like they were saying this is just one of the greatest acts of narcissism I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Where it's like Quentin Tarantino talking to his made-up character for 2.5 hours about fake movies that Quentin Tarantino made up, and also Rick Dalton complimenting, wow, Quentin, you sure do know a lot about movies. I don't know if you've seen this, but this is just one of my favorite weird things that's going on in movies right now, and I just thought it had to be brought up.
Yeah, as a podcast, it's the type of dumb stuff that if we had the power to, I would have announced.
Hey, we have a fake hotel that we run a podcast out of. It's way too elaborate for no reason.
Yeah,
right?
So we're fans of making the stuff up and acting like all these people are staying here. So I love it just because it's a maniacal genius type of thing to do.
The lore expanded, huh?
Yeah, they're like, the people were not supposed to have this much lore. Yeah, I was, huh?
I love lore.
Yeah, you know what? You know why you weren't supposed to? Because you can't think of this cool shit.
But the making up fake movies for 2.5 hours, that's just a master touch. Right. But anyways, back to Margaret Qualley and Sanctuary.
Yeah, and just because we were talking about them being in, Christopher Abbott is in the same type of where you would put Austin Butler too, where they're not actors that I would say people know them as the mainstream. They're
Austin Butler now is
that's
a superstar.
True.
He's in Dune, dude.
They're Timothy Chalamet level now.
Christopher Abbott's got a lot of work to do to become a household name.
Yeah, but us that like watching movies a lot, these are the type of actors that end up, I get excited for their projects because I'm like, actors.
We have to hold him near and dear. Please don't Jonathan Majors this, right? I really need Christopher Abbott to hold on because the reports are coming in that Paul Mescal is going to join the MCU, and I'm like, no. Adam Driver, they might join the MCU. No, like, I'm losing my favorite actors left and right.
The bag is inevitable.
Yeah. Literally Thanos, he's inevitable. Dread it, run from it. So I'm like, Christopher Abbott, keep doing this weirdo shit so they don't cast you in the MCU. Please.
I was like, before I was like, Timothy Chalamet and Florence Pugh.
He's my new breed of like actor that you never heard of, right? But all the cool people who heard of Christopher Abbott. If you're listening to this show, you definitely know who he is. But ask some dude in the cubicle next to you. There's no shot he knows who this guy is.
Christopher Abbott. But tell him if he knows what Possessor is.
Yeah, like, dude. Oh, I'm sorry you don't know, and you're missing out on one of the greatest working actors today. But hey, I guess some people are into that.
I guess you're not a sicko.
Christopher Abbott, Sweet Prince, dude.
Yeah.
I don't really have too much more to say because I do think I will start spoiling this movie if I go on much longer than this, and this is technically a bonus episode. So you got any closing thoughts before you want to close this out?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say that after you kind of preface with this, but after doing a lot of the IP movies, which we like, I mean, I'm pretty sure some of them are in your top 10, you know, some of them are for me too. John Wick is still immovable at this point.
Let's go!
So, you know, there's nothing wrong with IP, but I mean, this movie was just really refreshing, and whenever a movie like this becomes one of my favorite movies, it kind of really shows or reinforces the love I have for cinema, I think.
Yeah, I think what happened with the IP train of moving was that we just weren't getting enough of a balance recently. Because, like we said, we had saw Master Gardener, and we were like, fuck. Like, I thought that was going to be my balance.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then we just needed something like this. Because a few months ago, I feel like the balance was pretty good. It was like, oh, wow, Evil Dead did this. And even though it's IP, you know, it's like it's a smaller movie, but it still did really good. And then this movie's doing good. This movie's doing good. Unfortunately, I don't think Sanctuary will probably make any money, but thankfully that's not Neon's main motive, it seems like, when they distribute movies. So go see this movie because it definitely needs the help. There was only 2 other people sitting in the theater with us. Oh, I forgot. I want to close it out.
They were having their own
Sanctuary.
Sanctuary.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure me and you were like inadvertently cock blocking just by existing in this theater.
Yeah.
Which hasn't happened to me in a very long time. And I was just kind of like, yo, chill. I'm watching the movie.
Yeah. I get it. It's hot.
Literally, the girl was like, hey, no, stop it. I'm like,
flashbacks.
Yeah, that was kind of weird. I was like, yo, can you guys just go home and watch porn together? Please leave me out of this.
Come on, man. This is the first time I'm watching this movie.
Yeah, I don't need it going on in live action behind me either. But that was interesting. I just felt like that was more of an exciting theater experience, even though there's only 2 other people there.
Yeah, like, wow. At first, we thought we were getting a private screening. And then all of a sudden, these teenagers pull up.
They were having. We never got to do the thing where we were hoping that it was just going to be me and you. And I screenshotted my picture and be like, can you believe it? Just one guy sat next to me in the theater.
I was the only guy here. Yeah. And then somebody else comes in. Where do you think he wants to sit?
Oh, man. But anyways, go see Sanctuary if you haven't. If you're looking for some really fun, ha-ha sicko shit, I do think that you will be satisfied. And maybe even a little surprised. Unfortunately, I don't want to ruin this movie for anybody, so this podcast can't go on much longer. This is the kind of movie you just want to experience as blank as possible. So,
I mean, it's not that long. 90 minutes runtime.
It's a banger of a movie. Go check it out, man.
Yeah, man.
All right, like, subscribe, comment as always, and please tell us if you saw and you enjoyed Sanctuary. Bye-bye.
See ya.